I'm super excited about today's conversation. And Jeff Roth, thanks for popping on your video, and you too, Keith. Anybody else capable of popping it on, it makes the experience far better to be able to see active faces and see some engagement. And just a reminder, if you have questions, thoughts, ahas, throw them in the chat. We'll be reviewing those towards the end, and as appropriate, we'll throw questions, because today's conversation will likely, I would be stunned if there weren't some really good questions, because it's a conversation that I think everyone needs to have, and not everyone is. And some of us are in the know, some are not. So anyway, quick introduction. Greg and I became fast friends a few months ago when we met over, I believe it was a glass of wine or two. And it was supposed to be a 20-minute, yeah, it was supposed to be an introductory, just a few minutes. And I think we spent a couple hours together, and super impressed with your track record, your history, and also your perspective. And so I thought, what better person to have on our show than you? And so welcome to the show. I'm going to continue your bio here in a second, but just wanted to welcome you.
Well, thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody, and really excited about the conversation this morning. Morning, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. And so let's see, any other housekeeping? I think we're good to go. Let's roll with it. So, a few topics are more relevant than cryptocurrency, blockchain, and digital assets. And so thankfully, and I'm excited that that's your arena and expertise. But before that, you've got quite a storied business history. And one thing I'll remind everybody is the conversation we have on this show isn't just about X's and O's and tactical approach to business, but it's holistic, and it's about life and success in general. When we talk about empire builders, I don't think building a financial empire alone creates a happy, wholesome experience in this lifetime. And we get one run at it. So some of the questions, as Greg knows, and we've discussed in advance, are, what got you going? What gets you up early and keeps you up late? How did you, what are the origins of how you've become the person you've become holistically? So just that's a preface. But for more than 2 decades, Greg's been the CEO and senior executive at Fortune 500 and startup enterprises in the financial services, insurance, and wellness industries, including American Express, Ameriprise Financial, Crawford and Pulse Centers. And after becoming one of the youngest, if not the youngest, certified financial planners of the nation, you then go on to assume a progression of financial planning, wealth management, and insurance roles that led to leadership and directorships. Sought after speaker. You've got tremendous expertise, and I could go on and on. You've got a degree plus some MBA work from the Goethe School of Business at Emory, which is impressive as well. And I like that it says here you're a serial mentor.
Right.
Most people, it feels like in the circle of this conversation, constantly use the entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. So, and maybe we even start there just for fun. You're active also in philanthropy and supporting other causes outside of business, and that's awesome. So you're basically, what I see in your bio is a student of business and a student of life. What does a serial mentor do?
Rick, again, it's a pleasure to be here with the audience. Look, I think all of us, whether or not you have one special mentor, one lady or gentleman in your life that took an interest in your development or helped you along the way, or like me, you were fortunate enough to have a number of people seem to arrive at just the right time to share their perspective and take a disproportionate interest in my own development. I feel very fortunate to be that gentleman. I feel fortunate to have had the parents that I had, the upbringing that I had, the experiences that, formed me as a younger gentleman. I was raised in an entrepreneurial household, but, along the way, there were so many people that just seemed to show up at just the right time and provide me with the right encouragement and counsel and advice, or admonishment at time, or kick in the butt, quite frankly. And I felt, as I continued to progress in my way, I wanted to repay that the only way that I felt that I could, which is whenever possible, if I have an opportunity where I could teach somebody something that I got right, or more likely share with them something I screwed up along the way, and maybe help them on their own journey. That's really how I've approached it. And I take that approach, but very structurally, I contribute to, mentorship organizations within the Emory community. Certainly, as you know, Rick, here in the Atlanta metropolitan area, there is a robust startup and entrepreneurial community, and I'm actively contributing in those places to try and live up to that ethos as best I can.
Well, it's a beautiful place to be, and what a cool, badge of honor to be in the business of helping people. So I appreciate you for that. So let's dive in. Where did it all begin? Like, where are you originally from? Kind of, what's a young Greg Johnson look like?
I probably have the same haircut, I can tell you that, Rick, for starters. And then I graduated into a Pete Rose haircut for those old enough to appreciate that unattractive look. But no, I'm originally from Massachusetts. I grew up in a blue collar town about 10, 15 miles north of Boston, Massachusetts, for those familiar with New England. And actually, it was those roots that were a big part of my upbringing. Actually, my parents adopted my sister and I, so we got very lucky early as infants to be adopted and to be raised in such a nurturing and supportive environment. My father was a blue-collar entrepreneur. He was a hairstylist who was smart enough to own his own real estate and purchase more and more real estate. So, in fact, interestingly enough, I thought I was going to have a career that would resemble your audience. You know, I was a real estate and urban development major when I went to college, and then just found my way into wealth management and financial services. But, you know, this is the days of living in Massachusetts when it wasn't a successful sports community. You know, I grew up a Patriots fan where you couldn't watch those games on TV, and the tables have turned a little bit, obviously, over the last 20 years. But those are some of the tenets or the anchors to my upbringing. Large family with lots of cousins, and you know, that kind of rich, you know how I described it in another interview, Rick, and I think we might have talked about this. I felt like I had the New England version of the movie The Sandlot. You know, those were the days. If people know the Sandlot movie, it was lots of family, friends. You played baseball pickup every single day. And again, the pillars of hard work, education were every single day in my house.
That's awesome. It sounds like quite a wholesome experience, and you know, something to strive for as a parent too. And so as you evolved as a kid and moved your way through school, you mentioned an interest in real estate, and that was driven largely by your dad.
That's right.
Maybe share how you did migrate, what mindset led you to the direction you ultimately landed in your first real career move.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. When I look back at it, these are two regrets. I remember, you know, working a construction job in high school, and then driving into Boston to look at and meet with a real estate agent when I was 17 that was selling a condominium, a townhouse over by Fenway Park. Didn't know what I was doing, and tried to get all the information so I could talk my dad into buying that property. And aside from that decision, which he passed on, and my other encouragement to buy a Dunkin' Donuts franchise in Washington, D.C. when I was a student, those are probably the two biggest business regrets that I think he ever had. But, you know, I pursued the real estate. I love the creativity. I certainly was enamored with the opportunity to build wealth and wealth creation and an empire. All of that, I'm not going to lie, those were very intriguing and alluring components to it. But I happened in my senior year to be in a course taught by a financial advisor. And I thought, you know what, I'd like to make some money in my career, and I'd like to know what to do with it. And I'm going to set the stage for you again for the older members in the audience. If not, other people can use the Google. But this was in 1989, and it was taught by a professor who was a CFP. In those days, there were maybe about 300 certified financial planners in the world. And this fellow looked like Bill Bixby from the Hulk TV show, if that rings any bells for folks. Big, fat Ronald Reagan ties and thick glasses and that whole thing. And while I can't even recall this professor's name, what I do recall is him being so clear about the future of what would become the wealth management industry. And so those teachings, that impression that he made, besides the fact my dad kind of gently suggested I see what I could do in the real world before going back to law school and my real estate ambitions. So when I left school, the only company that was actually talking about the same vision that professor had was American Express. Not a bad company to be associated with, and that started a 22-year relationship back in 1990. So,
very cool. So, how long were you at American Express?
Yeah, it was a couple of decades, and you know, this is where I got lucky, and this is where I had really good leaders and mentors kind of pop in and out. Going back to the earlier thread of the conversation, look, when you're starting out at any career, you've got to be smart enough to be dumb enough to follow the successful people and the systems that they've built that already work. So I'll raise my hand and say that early on, I did two things right. I was smart enough to be dumb enough to follow the systems of successful people. And I also worked about 100 hours a week for 4 years. And so my story in my career is I was in private practice as a CFP for 10 years while at American Express. And then I got recruited into corporate leadership, where I realized I really enjoyed developing other people as much as I enjoyed helping people with their financial wellness. And that really started me in a career towards executive leadership. I was fortunate. I rose fairly quickly. I led some very big initiatives for American Express that had to do with the wealth management business and their, at that time, brand new black card. Some of you may be familiar with American Express as a black card, a platinum card. Well, in those days, it was brand new. And so I was involved in some of the work to kind of bring those two programs together. And I did that right up until about 2011, when I said, you know what, I've done one thing my entire adult life. I'm going to take a sabbatical. I'm going to go to Emory. I'm going to do an MBA. I'm going to travel with my family and take advantage of these experiences while I can, and then figure out what else I want to do.
That's really cool. So what were a couple of the bigger lessons you learned while at American Express? What did corporate, because a lot of our folks, some come from corporate backgrounds, some just, to your point, almost start out and default to real estate. And obviously it's a rewarding and financially beneficial career choice if you're good at it. And we have the best in the business. But what did you learn in your corporate path that lends well today?
I think there's a couple of things. One for sure is the word, when you look at being entrepreneurial, it's not defined by W-2 or 1099. And so whether or not you've worked at a corporation or whether or not you started straight into an entrepreneurial path where you've been working for yourself your entire career, the lessons, the principles, the approach is not defined by whether or not you get a W-2. And so I think you can learn a great deal from people that are already in your book of business, that work at corporations, that behave entrepreneurially. And I think that's one. You know, the second thing that I really took with me from that time was the approach of how to develop other people and how to identify talent, nurture talent, and build teams. And that's one of the things that more than anything else, I'm very grateful for from those early days. I'll be honest with you, Rick, I didn't take it seriously enough at the time. You know, if you could look back at yourself and if you could say, hey, knucklehead, would you do a couple of things differently? You know, I just got volunteered to be involved in, let's say, a leadership development program, and I showed up because my bosses told me to go. Right. And what I didn't fully appreciate then was how much money they were spending on my development, how actually unique this investment in my leadership, my skill set, my abilities was. And I would only find that out when I left American Express to realize that that wasn't the case everywhere. And so I look back and I see those as opportunities. I would also say, on a tactical note, because we're sitting here in January, is that I got very, very familiar and comfortable with business planning. That usually I wouldn't wait till January, but not going to lie, some years it just waits till January. But we got into the habit, and one of the things I learned very early on was the power of doing business planning. We talked about books that you and I both like. Let me share a book that I think if people have not read, I will encourage you to read it. But if you don't want to read it, you don't have to. I'm going to give you the one sentence book review right now. And it's a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And it's been in release. It's an old book. It's a 2-hour read, even for a slow reader. And basically what Gerber said is that entrepreneurs spend too much time working in the business, not enough time working on their business. And so you guys all know this. You ladies and gents know better than I do. You can get sucked into the vortex of key activities. You have to do a show. You have to go this. All of the things that are important and necessary. And it's conversations like you're curating with me and other people, Rick. I feel pretty honored to be a part of this series because I've looked at the other people that you've interviewed. But you're providing that opportunity for your group to pause and actually spend an hour or 45 minutes to work and think about the business. to think about strategy, to think about some of the things that get often sucked, like I said, into the vortex of day-to-day activities. Those key activities I live on. I manage myself on key activities, but if you're not careful, that's one of the things that can be compromised. So anyway, those are a few ramblings about some of the big lessons, some of the big takeaways that served me well from my time at Amex and Ameriprise.
Well, I appreciate the share. And, one thing that my mentor, Bob Kalinsky, once asked me, he said, are you having a 10-year career or 10 one-year careers? And it's back to the vortex of cyclical behavior. If you don't stop and redirect and energize around your evolution and improvement and your purposeful pathing, you're going to find yourself just groundhog year after year after year. So thanks for that reminder. We have a great class on building a business plan. And so everyone on the call, if you haven't taken it, or, connect with your team leader and make sure that it's on your agenda, because without a plan, you're basically compromising the potential to expand, and you're likely going to fall prey to your habits. So speaking of habits, Greg, as a certified professional planner, financial planner, what would you say are the core tenets of wealth creation? And let's migrate that, because you said something earlier. You said the key is to make money and then figure out what to do with it. And you sort of elected a career option that led down the what to do with it path. What advice would you give realtors who are making really good money now, which most of the professionals on the call today are doing really well, in terms of core beliefs around wealth building and then wealth preservation?
Look, I think that the best advice that I can give is, just as you've developed a reputation and a relationship in your own area of expertise, you really need to surround yourself, and it's work to do this, but you need to surround yourself with, I think, a couple of really good people. Certainly, finding the right CFP, I think, is a really important step. And not that the CFP is the only designation you should be thinking about when retaining financial counsel, but I think that's a very good de minimis step, a first step to say, here's a lady or gent that has gone through a minimum amount of certification. You know that they're taking a holistic view of planning. And I think you need to put the elbow grease in, Rick, to get to know those individuals. Because when you find a really good advisor, hold on to them with dear life, okay? And when you interview somebody, if you haven't, or you're considering reevaluating your existing financial counsel, what I would be listening for and not prompting them is whether or not they talk to you about just basic stuff, or whether or not they're introducing subjects and conversation and strategy that's beyond your years. In other words, when I was still in private practice, if you and I were having a conversation and I was looking to work with you, I might have said to you, Rick, look, I don't want you to retain me as your CFP for advice and recommendations and strategies consistent with a gentleman of your age and your current means. Retain me because I'm going to bring things to you. I'm going to talk to you about recommendations and strategies that are really going on for people that are 10, 15, 20 years your senior. So don't hire me if you want to play checkers. My fee's too expensive. But if you're looking for chess, this is the person that you want to maybe collaborate with. So as you're evaluating, think about your advisors as to whether or not, are they talking to you about the 30-year ahead? What are they saying to you about mature healthcare issues and long-term care? How are they thinking and talking to you about the emergence of digital assets, crypto, and so forth? Have they taken the step to actually get certified in some of these asset classes? Because newsflash, that's not really going to be going away. That's number one. The second is, you need to identify a massively good tax person. So I don't care if that's with a big firm. Atlanta has a number of really good top 50 firms, but you need to identify somebody on the tax front that can go with you on your journey, because you are likely to have a complex portfolio of both real estate and other investment holdings. And those two individuals, probably more than anybody else, I think are important to develop and grow those relationships with. But when it comes to financial advisors, I have, and Rick, we laughed about this on that first conversation. I said something very candid to you, because I was one, because I managed more than 2,000 financial advisors, and I saw the insides of the industry for many, many years. I have a very high and low opinion of the industry. And so it will take work and elbow grease for you to really identify one. But I gave you a really good cheat sheet. If all your financial advisor is talking about is the talking points of today, and they don't bring up some of the more nuanced topics of wealth creation and preservation, like complicated insurance trusts, like mature healthcare issues, et cetera, on their own, then I think you've been given a big clue. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And I recall too, you conjured a memory that I had an accountant at one point that, I was intrigued by this conservation easement strategy, which is, suspect today, but in the moment it was kind of the rage. And I went to him and I said, hey, what's your take on the liability and the risk and the upside, and what should I be concerned, and how do I vet it? And he said, I don't know. I'll go do some research and get back to you. And that was a clue. Like, if they're not proactively seeking, next week, next year, and 10 years from now knowledge, so that they're the proven counsel with, again, a learning-based mentality, you probably have the wrong guy or gal. And he ended up, by the way, coming back to me with a paragraph or two opinion, and then promptly charged me $1,200 for the research.
For the privilege of getting him squared away. Yeah, thank you. May I have it? You made me think about something, and here's another, this is a great cheat sheet, but this can go backwards to your audience. This works both ways. But one of the things that, if you're meeting with a new financial advisor, especially, now the tax people, unless you've got one that's really specialized, they are a highly thin margin business right now. All they're doing is preparation. That is a dinosaur business, to be honest with you. But if you're talking about a real tax strategist, a real tax advisor, this also holds true. But think about this. Today, one of my frustrations when I'm hiring people is if they come in for an interview and they haven't done at least a modicum of due diligence. Rick, when you think about all the tools that the industry has available with the internet, all of the ability to learn about somebody, you should know almost everything about somebody walking into that conversation. If that financial advisor doesn't even know where you went to college, if they haven't even gone on your LinkedIn profile, I think you've got an indication of how dialed in they are or how prepared they are for a conversation. Okay. Awesome. I'll just give you an example. We were approached by a very large family office to do some business on the crypto side. We may get into that a little later in the conversation. But before I spoke with the person, not only did I go on his LinkedIn, I realized that he was also an avid photographer. I knew that he sang a cappella. I knew that he was a black and white specialist. And so when I started the conversation by saying, listen, before we get into the seriousness, I want to know if you could sing one song to save your life a cappella, what would it be? And so instantly he knew I had done my homework.
Right.
I knew where I could steer the conversation. But this works both ways. I mean, if you know you're going into a networking event and you know the attendees, the advantages that you have in the real estate industry to know a prospect, or if you're trying to get a listing or whatever it is that's relevant to you, and you know that couple, if you don't walk into it having done at least 15 minutes of cursory due diligence, where'd they go to school, so you could, think about the ability to make some rapport build with somebody like Rick, who's obviously a UGA fan. I think everyone's figured that out, right? I mean, if you can't even do that, it's a real tell. It works both ways. When you're interviewing your professionals, you should do yours and expect them to know something about you. That's a real, but by the way, be prepared to be really disappointed, okay? Be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs.
That's awesome. Well, and it's a really valid point, because people don't trust you until they like you. And the number one quickest way to be likable is to be relatable. And to be relatable, you just need common ground. And, to be heard and understood is the greatest gift you can give another person. So thanks for that reminder. That's a massive tip. So let's migrate into the digital space, if you don't mind. Given your work in crypto and digital, I mean, what are a few key things that, and maybe even you segue or jump off from how did you land there from MX, you left. So there is a gap there I think you should fill. And then lead into your core topic today that I'm excited.
I'd be happy to. And I'll do a little bit of a teaser, Rick, because real estate is one of the industries that will be most disrupted, both operationally and perhaps structurally, from blockchain technologies. Okay, I can't emphasize that enough. That as you think about all the other swirl, all the headlines, all the hype that's around crypto, don't lose sight of the fact that your industry and all of the different tributaries that feed into the real estate operation are likely to be the most disrupted, one of the most disrupted, along with banking, legacy banking, by some of these technologies. Some of that will happen sooner than later, and some of it will happen perhaps past the arc of your career, but know that the industry is going to be disrupted. So for me, after Emory, I decided to do jobs that I thought I could get paid MBAs, do things I was very uncomfortable with. I was a innovation executive in a couple of other businesses, but right before I co-founded Rubicon, I was the CEO of a medical device company based in Georgia that was in the wellness industry. And it was extremely rewarding opportunity for me. We scaled the business. It was a family business that frankly had stalled, and we scaled it from about a $10 million company to 3 times that size. And, I decided to exit because of my own desire to do something that brought me back into the financial services industry. And I was approached by some people that I knew from my old days at American Express about an idea that had kind of been fermenting for a while, but it stalled in committee. It's kind of stuck in purgatory, if you will. Right. And they asked me to kind of come in and take a look. And the idea for the business that became Rubicon was an opportunity that was identified. And that opportunity is still wildly abundant right now. And we're very, very pleased with the success we've been able to generate early on. But right now in the crypto investing world, you only have a couple of choices. One, if you really enjoy being a do-it-yourselfer, if you're a real technologist, the option one is you do it yourself, right? You put the time, the energy, the money, the opportunity cost in, and then you decide to manage your own crypto portfolio, or you even mine it yourself if you're a real technologist. And so for some folks, that's an option. The other available option that people have had at their disposal involves what are called derivative investment products. So these are futures NFTs, some people might have heard about. Companies like Grayscale and Galaxy and Scaramucci's Skybridge Partners funds. These are products that don't actually invest in crypto themselves, but they actually are derivative trust products that kind of sort of follow the movement of the crypto industry. And so better than nothing, and absolutely an important part of the ecosystem, because they help to mature it, they help to legitimize the industry, to pave the way, frankly, for what we're doing at Rubicon and for other options that are out there. What we saw was a way to say, well, wait a minute. A lot of folks that are busy, I don't know, real estate professionals or other professionals that currently use financial advisors, wouldn't it be great if there were investment products that basically said, I'd love to have crypto, I don't want to do it myself. Wouldn't it be great if we could have a portfolio of cryptos that were actively managed, professionally managed, rebalanced on a regular basis in a way that kind of tried to avoid some of the risk associated with the industry? And that's really what we set out to do. So Rubicon Crypto is an investment asset management company. We have 2 portfolios of cryptocurrencies, and we provide a service to both individual investors as well as partner with financial advisors who use us as a sub-advisor, right? These financial advisors can't spend 100 hours a week to understand this emerging technology. So we become a sub-advisor expert for them, and they allocate their clients' portfolios to us. And that's both the story of the origin as well as a little bit about kind of what we do day to day.
Okay, so maybe for the sake of the layman, and even myself, for clarification, you mentioned there's, portfolio and mining. So to get engaged or involved, maybe even a step back before that, sure. Crypto is nothing more than a digital transference that's non-connected to, a name on like the United States Treasury. Because so
Right.
maybe even step back and then move
Love
through
to.
it slower.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to. Let me do it this way. And I think one of the things that we try and educate any audience that we speak in front of is, let's talk about what is money. What does money mean, and how do we think about it?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that, we're both here in Atlanta, you and I was doing a town hall presentation to a fairly Tony affluent group, and speaking about this. And somebody said to me about Bitcoin, they asked a question that was a little bit snarky. And they said, how the hell can Bitcoin be a currency if it's not backed up by a government? How can it be money if it's not backed up by a government? I'm sure anybody that's listening that knows anything or heard anything about this has thought about that, because it's a really good question. So let me actually reprise my answer for your audience today. I think folks might benefit from that. The first thing that I would say to people is the notion. Let's set aside two things to start. First, we are so spoiled to be Americans, it's not even funny. So you realize that if we grew up in Argentina, if we lived in Venezuela, if we were from Israel, Hungary, or about 27 other countries that in the last 2 decades have experienced hyperinflation, we have a different view and don't really care about whether or not our country or government backs up the money. We've had a very different experience with our money. The second thing, before I get into maybe a deeper understanding of crypto and how it works, is there are also, let's also set aside that many people today, you've probably heard, the Federal Reserve, the policy that we've had to continue to print more and more money, albeit for some very good reasons at the time, concerns people. You've probably heard this, right? The more we continue to print money, so-called quantitative easing, it has helped your industry and my industry for sure. But there are consequences that many people are very concerned about. So let me take a step back. Rick, I'm gonna do this example with you, and I'm gonna kind of role play it with you a little bit. But I think I can make a case to you that you actually participate in a currency system pretty regularly that is not backed up by a government. And so, Rick, do you have a credit card by any chance? Do you use credit cards? Do you use charge cards?
Absolutely.
And I'm willing to bet you probably have had an American Express card at one point in your life, correct?
And still do.
Yep. And so when you charge on your American Express card, you obviously make a payment. But is there anything that you get when you make a payment? Is there anything you like about your American Express card when you make that payment? What do you get also?
Just a receipt for payment. I mean, it's confirmation.
Yeah, you do. And I'll help you out a little bit, but when every time you make a charge, you also get something called membership reward points.
Ah, good point. Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Delta Sky Miles in my case.
Yep. All right. So think about membership reward points for a second. Believe it or not, when I was still with American Express back in 2003, we had a 100 club, meaning in the United States at that time, there was a little over 100 card members that had 100 million points.
Wow.
In their account. And there were a lot that were below that, but very high. Right. So I want you to think about this. American dollars, euros, yen, Chinese yuan, every fiat, so-called fiat currency, has these 4 properties to be money. They have to be a medium of exchange, a store of value, a unit of account, but most of all, they have to have a social contract with the society that participates in that money system in order for it to work. And when you think about your membership reward points, if you use membership reward points like today, it's so much easier to use them. You can use them with PayPal, you can use them on Amazon. As a matter of fact, the flow of membership reward points now is 1,000% more frequent than what it was 5 years ago. So when you think about membership reward points, they actually are a store of value. They have a unit of account. You get a statement. And if I said to you, Rick, where are your points? Are they in your pocket? Are they in the the safe deposit box at the house, to keep them at the bank. You don't know where they are. They're digital, but they're there when you want them and when you use them. There's no government managing that ecosystem, but Amex has a social contract with its participants to nurture this ecosystem. Does that make sense so far?
100%.
And so, yeah. And so when you think about it, what Greg did not say is Amex points are Bitcoin. I didn't say Amex points are US dollars. What I'm saying is that there are many other examples of how we can use different things as currency and actually do. So when we talk about what Bitcoin is, the very first cryptocurrency, it's those concepts. You know, in the state of Georgia, if you get divorced, your membership reward points are divisible, just like other assets or money. You know, if you have poor estate planning in the state of Georgia and most other states in the United States, those same loyalty points, be they airline or card, they are divisible in a probate proceeding, believe it or not. Wow. So there are meaningful, substantive programs that act as currencies that have existed for years and years. So as you think about whether you believe crypto to be credible or not, I use that example as maybe one anchor or tether to how you may already participate in currency systems and you don't think about it, okay? So I'm not sure if that was helpful for your audience, but I thought I would throw that out there.
100% helpful. And so as far as the mining side, these are people who link, this is the linking scenario of how they build computer power, right? Maybe share, that's something most people have heard and may or may not get it at the granular level, and it would be cool to know.
You know, the concept that there are two things about when the crypto industry emerged that are definitely not by accident, okay? All of the technology that goes into what you now know to be Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies largely existed, but in separate silos, in some cases for 20 or 30 years. Any of you that are James Bond fans or Da Vinci Code fans, the notion of sending encrypted messages throughout historical time has always existed. Right. The notion of using computers to send code is a relatively new science over the last 30 years. But many of these technologies that were compiled by the person who authored the white paper called Satoshi, right, who formed this notion of Bitcoin, saw a way to string all of these things together because of the evolution of computer technology. But the timing of this, the timing of it is really important. The white paper that first announced the idea behind Bitcoin came right after the financial crisis of 12 years ago, okay? And what the paper basically argued is it argued, look, we've entrusted central banks, government banks, and governments. We've entrusted banking institutions to run the financial system, and they've almost collapsed it. And that the technology now exists with coded messaging that we don't need to have centralized authorities to have a monetary system, that we have the power of encryption, and a big enough network of people globally could exist such that we could have an economic system such that it's not interfered with by these central authorities. The main piece of Bitcoin and all cryptos is the ability to function without other people getting in the way and screwing things up, much like they did during the financial crisis. And I led through that period, and it was whatever you thought it was. The great thing about the human condition, Rick, is our ability to forget negative stimulus. The worst thing about the human condition is our ability to forget negative stimulus. Those were very dark times. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for everybody to think about, this isn't just some, brand new technology that somebody dialed up 4 or 5 years ago. This was taking the foundation of gifted computer scientists, technologists, and cryptographers, and sewing it all together using the advancements in networks and theory today. So I'm not sure if that was a little bit too deep, but I'm trying to give you a little bit of the backstory to your audience as well, if that's helpful.
Well, I think it's important and I appreciate it. And a couple of thoughts that are floating around, and you guys are welcome to throw questions in the chat specific to any point that Greg makes. But seems to me that the argument among some of my peers who are pro Bitcoin and pro digital is that, government and taxes, and are they going to allow this to continue to evolve? And then the second question is, what's the basis for valuation and the inflationary component of why people, is one, it's a currency and a transference of value and the ability to navigate an exchange between two people or a business and a person. But the other half of it, most of the people I know are investing it strictly for, there's an upside potential, and then the play in competition. So there's three questions all in one. You take them in the order you want.
Well, all three of those questions are an entire syllabus at UGA. By the way, we just landed a huge research project collaboration with UGA we're pretty excited about. But let me see if I can break those down a little bit for everybody. The first thing that I would encourage anybody thinking about investing or evaluating this industry is to keep two things equally in mind, and they may seem divergent. On the one hand, the industry is at its infancy. So everything is going to continue to evolve. Anyone who says that they've got the market cornered on great ideas regarding digital assets and crypto, run away fast. Okay, we are so early, it's not even funny. At the same time, though, last year, if it was anything, it was an endorsement that 2021 was the year of crypto and digital asset legitimacy. And so if you're wondering whether or not it's hocus pocus, whether or not it makes sense, those are legitimate questions for anybody to be thinking about, let alone the implications to the real estate industry. But just on the subject of crypto itself, last year, Rick, we talked about this off camera a couple of times, but last year we saw more than $1 trillion of investment come into the broader industry. And it's not coming from folks like us. And this is why I think it's really important for all of your audience to pay attention to at least. I'm not saying you should get into crypto because these groups are, but I'm not saying you shouldn't either. So when you see $100 billion investment from sovereign funds in the Middle East, like the Abu Dhabi Investment Fund, considered to be the most shrewd sovereign investment fund in the world, when you see corporate treasuries investing on their balance sheets, when you see companies like Walmart allow more than 1,000 Bitcoin ATMs to be hosted on their footprint, when you see announcements from Visa to integrate crypto into their payments methodology, the point is, or when you see Harvard and other endowments, when you see pension funds buying these products and having a sleeve in their portfolio, you can still have any opinion you want about the asset classes, but you can't have the same opinion that you did maybe in 2015 and not sound silly. The asset classes are legitimate, but they still need to mature. Now, you also asked a question about inflation, and this ties into, again, the infancy stage a little bit. When Bitcoin was conceptually brought to being, it was going to be a currency. And it still has all the properties we described, but some of them are still less efficient than what they might be in the future with more technological enhancement and more developer focus on the technology. What I mean by that is some of your audience may have heard of Bitcoin being referred to as digital gold. Many people view Bitcoin because of its primacy. It's the largest, it's the first, it's got a fixed supply. In other words, some of your audience may not realize that eventually all this mining that you hear about, there will be a finite supply, which tends to make people think that Bitcoin, to your question, Rick, is going to be deflationary. Short term, what I want to remind your attendees today is, everyone, I want you to really take this away. Short-term crypto and digital assets still are going to be impacted and influenced by the same type of news and stimulus that the traditional equity and bond markets are. But after that short-term reaction, they tend to go back to their own habitat and behave however they're going to behave based on the things that drive their own growth or not. But short-term, there is correlation. Longer term, they are what is called uncorrelated to these traditional assets. So many people believe, myself included, that long-term, indeed Bitcoin especially, will be an inflationary hedge. And in fact, the very nature of how you cannot print more Bitcoin, it will be finite, makes it such a terrific long-term generational inflation hedge.
Wow. So here's an add-on question. So the long tail tends to exist in just about every industry where you've got 2 or 3 players and then the rest. And the rest combined don't equal the top or the second dog in that hunt. So who do you think second, third, fourth, how many players can enter this field? I know this is a huge question. And
it's a huge question. Look, there's 2 that I think, for our lifetime aren't going anywhere, and they're obvious. It's Bitcoin and Ethereum. But let me caution my next comments with a disclaimer. So it would be inappropriate for me to comment too much on any specific holding given my role.
Fair.
But let me talk to you about our approach in categories that we think are important and how you should think about where we see the real movement. I think that there's about 70% of the rules, Rick, that apply to how we evaluate what happened in Web 2.0 will carry over into this new world of digital and blockchain and crypto. So in other words, the notion of a few kind of survivors gobbling up everybody else, the Ray Wang has a great book called Everybody Wants to Rule the World that talks about those notions in incredible detail, but in common sense language. Terrific book. But the point is, crypto, whether we're doing an analysis of a project for our due diligence, the tokenomics they call it in the industry or not, only about 70% applies to these new asset classes. And so I don't know if the statement that only a few, because we're literally opening up markets that most people don't even understand exist or could potentially exist. So let me pull it back in a little bit as well. So our approach focuses on a couple of 3 big buckets. When we think about the ones you've never heard of, we have one portfolio that is all early stage kind of projects. And to your point, we fully realize some may not make it. It's the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. But what we're interested in is 3 categories, especially. One, many people may have heard of, called decentralized finance, or DeFi. And this is a very big, important category. And you also asked a question about what can governments do and so forth. Look, the tax man is always going to try and get their taxes. And you've been a professional in the real estate industry for a long time. You've been a businessman for a long time. When have you not had tax strategies available to you? No matter what they do to change the tax laws, you'll have opportunities to think strategically about how to optimize your taxes. So let's not get up in arms. There's always going to be creative ways to figure it out. But the notion that you're going to hide your money in crypto, that's nonsense. If anything, one of the popular narratives in the media is, well, it's only for criminals and they can move that. Do you realize that we have very smart coders? Our government is setting up traps for these people to learn and do stings, digital stings as we speak. Wow. It's actually harder. It's harder to hide crypto money, believe it or not, than it is cash. So let's just keep that in mind, everybody. Okay. So we just want people to think about decentralized finance as an important bucket. A bucket. Secondly, it's the metaverse, God, I wish Facebook hadn't changed their name to Meta, because it was fine talking about the metaverse in general before, but now it gets convoluted. But the gaming industry is especially important to the evolution of digital and crypto. It's important not just because the technologists are so gifted and they're thinking about ways to improve time, speed, transaction processing, all of the things that technologists geek out about. But what's really kind of cool for all of you as entrepreneurs is some of these gaming companies, these gaming blockchain projects and tokens, they're coming up with new commercial models for how people can make money, make a living. That's something that most industries don't do. Now, I'll give you one example of that. There's a project called Axie Infinity. Some people may have some basic understanding, but it's a gaming crypto. And what they did is they came up with a way to basically create a blockchain. You come and you can battle and build with your blockchain creatures. But what ended up happening is they created a model where they could have other people play somebody's game and then pay them to do that. And they created what's now called the play to earn business model. And there's hundreds of thousands of people that make a full-time living, basically being a professional gamer for somebody else's battle bot, for lack of a description. And again, that's a crude, high-level example of how innovation is coming from that space, not just in the technology and how to get a better blockchain, a better way to kind of move back and forth between the different worlds of digital and analog. So that's one. And then the third category is we look to identify companies that are called decentralized applications. So just like on everybody's phone here, you have application development for the mobile world. There's also applications being developed for the digital world. And we look for projects that we think are really interesting. One of those general categories is in blockchain storage. So there are companies with tokens that are designed to find ways to optimize all the storage that's going to have to take place on the blockchain. So long answer to a short question, and I apologize for that.
No, that's awesome and helpful. So we have 7 minutes left, Greg. What direction, topic, or area would you have, in 7 minutes, how do we maximize that time?
Let's talk about the implications, if you don't mind, to the real estate industry, because I think it's going to be very, very significant. Perfect. There are 3 buckets that you all should be paying attention to regarding a blockchain and its impact. One of the areas that I think is unfortunately going to go the way of the travel industry. Does it mean that it completely disappears? No. But it means that if you're not adding real value, you are going to see massive consolidation. Many of your clients have often wondered, why do I have to pay for title insurance? Why do I have to pay for an attorney to show up, hand me a pen, so I can sign 75 copies of something? What value are they adding? And so what the blockchain does at a core level is provide an undisputed, immutable record of ownership of assets. More and more, that's going to find its way to the top line of the real estate industry. And the need for title insurance will ultimately disappear completely. So that's a part of the ecosystem that is going to be impacted. Another thing that is going to happen is that as digital currencies become more connected globally, the ability for real estate agents to facilitate international real estate transaction is going to be opened up massively. Obviously, the popularity of international real estate shows and everything else, there's a demand. But now with the development of some of these, what are called stable coins, the ability to do transactions between other countries, and by extension, real estate transactions, will be opened up at an exponential level over the next decade. That's not going to go away. Another area that I think is going to be super important to watch is something called NFTs and fractional real estate ownership. Some of you may have heard the big property in Los Angeles, the 121,000 square foot mega mansion. Well, the group that's going to basically own that property is now looking at selling fractional NFT ownership as a way to own properties. And so this is a trend that is not going to be a fad. It may seem really whimsical right now, but imagine you could actually own a piece of an historic building in New York City, and you could have a sliver of that property. There will be new investment products and new ways for people to participate in that economy that is only just getting started. So if you listen to the headlines and you think about these things, it is finding its way into the real estate world in an epic way. And in the metaverse, some of you, I believe, on this call today will become the new real estate barons in the metaverse. You realize that companies, corporations, individuals are spending billions of dollars to buy virtual land, virtual property in the metaverse. Now, the gamers that are here today are already kind of familiar with this. You pay for certain things to play. You get certain designer clothes for your skin, for your avatar. And now more and more people are spending real money in the digital world for digital property. So this is literally an hour-long conversation minimum. I just wanted to make sure for those of you that may be less initiated, you have to think about it, because I promise you, banking and real estate are likely to be the two most disrupted industries that we're aware of today because of crypto, digital, and blockchain.
That's amazing. Can you define metaverse for those that don't know?
Yeah, the metaverse is a catch-all phrase, Rick, that describes what many people may be familiar with games like Second Life that were early, The Sims. These were examples where people that are more and more comfortable kind of living in communities that are online. And so think of it as folks that be the early days of a chat room, the early days of gaming online, these communities where people more and more today feel more comfortable expressing themselves and living their lives in a digital world. The metaverse describes all the companies, all the communities that are working to develop this virtual ecosystem. And much like the physical world, there'll be different portals to enter that focus on entertainment, that focus on sports, that focus on finance, that anyone can participate in. But just know today that there are literally hundreds of billions of dollars that are pouring into this. The celebrities get all the headlines, but they do show you a way to see what is happening. So you hear about people wanting to buy property next to, Snoop Dogg, for example. Snoop is a brilliant marketer, but the Snoop has a ton of digital property. So companies are looking to locate inside the metaverse and build experiences there for people that want to interact in that fashion. Does that help?
It does. This trajectory seems undeniable. And to circle back to Rubicon, or how would you advise a layman to, and it sounds like instead of hand selecting one or two, maybe the portfolio strategy is brilliant, given some of the uncertainty and the capacity to rebalance based on real-time data that maybe, we're out selling houses and creating investments in hard assets. What's your thought there?
Well, look, I'm smarter than I look, but I'm also smart enough, again, to be dumb enough to know, hire a really good Georgia Tech Rhodes Scholar, varsity athlete who spent 20 years developing patents, in the Web 2.0 world. That's my chief investment officer. And so, we're proud of the proprietary models that we put in place to kind of try and give our clients the best shot to participate in some of these emerging programs. Anybody that's interested, of course, I think you teased out, in the information, but you can go to RubiconCrypto.com and learn more. We'll talk to anybody in Rick's world privately. We don't do that for everybody. We just don't have the capacity, but anybody from this conversation that wants to have a a private conversation, happy to do that. Rick, you know that we said we would do that. But
Yes, sir.
you know, at the end of the day, we put a lot of information. There's a lot of content that can help you build off of some of these, hopefully not convoluted themes that I shared with you today.
Well, this was an incredible experience and quite an eye opener. And you've expanded what I already thought I knew and created almost as many questions as answers. But that's the beautiful part about, no, that's a gift. That was a compliment. By opening doors, I mean, for every door you open, there's a new corridor with more doors. And so hopefully for everyone on the call today, that some new corridors of curiosity and intrigue were open. And, you know, the reality is this is coming. It's not like yesterday's news, and it's a matter of how it's executed, who executes, and then what are the ancillary components that create a successful experience. Anything, final remarks? What keeps you up at night and gets you up early?
What keeps me up at night is something that I'm very concerned about, which is everything that we try to advise people about this industry is to cut out the hype. Rational exuberance. We are excited about this industry. I hope that comes across when I speak to you. I'm very excited about this, but go back to what I said, we're early. And for most people, I get very concerned about them doing stupid stuff. Folks should only have right now, in our opinion, 3 to 5% of their portfolio into these asset classes. You all should be putting 5 to 10% of your thinking, because you're in the real estate industry, into this space, in my opinion. But what keeps me up is reputational risk. What keeps me up is, look, I'm from New England. I think Tom Brady is a great American hero. But the reality is commercials like Tom Brady's are not helpful, because many consumers will buy crypto because Brady thinks it's cool, and they will get hurt. So I get concerned about reputational risk stalling the progress of all the great stuff that's going on. And what gets me excited is helping people cross this new digital divide, Rick. I think we're on to something here. I don't think it, I know it. And we want to be one of the participants that can help people do it in a way that brings a lot of common sense to the conversation.
Well, thanks again. This has been an amazing conversation, Greg. I appreciate
it. Sean, you have a question, reach out to me.
I do have a question, Greg. For the record, as an Atlanta native, Steve Grogan was my favorite player. Go ahead.
Oh my God, Kansas Snake. He was a Kansas guy, used to wear that crazy neck brace. I love it.
Last quarterback to call his own plays, right? For someone who's crypto curious, but incredibly naive on the subject, what 3 pieces of advice would you say? Hey, go to this resource, read this article, do these 3 things before you talk to me.
Yeah, I would spend, look, I'm going to be self-serving here because we put a lot of money and effort into it. Go to our website. There is tremendous content on there that we think speaks to the common sense side of things. The second is keep the 3 to 5% in mind. And then once you're in, stick with it. We tell people put the right amount in, no more, and plan on being there for the right duration, no less. You have to go in with a long in mind. And then here's the other thing. If you've, and I know you know this movie, Sean, I can tell if you know Grogan, the movie A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks. Let's do the locker room scene. She's crying. He comes in and he says, what? Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying in baseball. We try and tell people no crying in crypto, because if you listen to what we're saying, we're going to tell you this will be the most volatile thing you've ever done before. And it's still appropriate at 3 to 5%. But don't act surprised when it goes up by 100%. Don't act surprised when it goes down by 30%. Does that make sense? Those would be the 3 things I would try to tell you. Learn about kind of what we're doing, because I think it's common sense. It's not proprietary. It's general education on our website. The second thing is don't put more than 3 to 5%, and then be prepared to be in for the long term, and don't act surprised, please. No surprise, no crying in crypto.
All right. Any last question? We're over time, and I'm grateful. I know you probably have a noon meeting. All right. I think we're good. Greg, you're awesome, man. I'm indebted and appreciate you very much, man. You've enlightened and inspired.
That was a fun group, man. Thanks a lot, Rick. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year and continued success to everybody.
I'll see you soon.